all of the makings, the three ingredients representing the Passover, the departure of the tribes from Israel, which I've done with Jewish friends over the years, but it was very special to have that as a part of the full moon ceremony. And then they wanted me to say a few words. And again, every now and again, the clarity comes back to me that I experienced with the shaman in Brazil. And I said, you know, I'm thinking of what would be appropriate for a full moon ceremony, and let's just simplify history a little bit and start with the age of polytheism, where there were many, many gods, many, many goddesses, and they were different religions were in competition with each other, and so when you captured another tribe, you'd sacrifice warriors from that tribe, and sometimes women and children also, and sometimes you'd eat their brains to get their strength. Sometimes you'd sacrifice them to the deities, and the deities would drink their blood. And then that moved into the age of monotheism. Well, in monotheism, you sacrificed animals. And you had one god now, but as sort of a honor to the god, you would sacrifice a lamb, or you'd sacrifice a goat, or you'd sacrifice a pig. The New Testament, the Old Testament, especially the Old Testament of the Christian Bible, and the Jewish scriptures are filled with animal sacrifices. You also have animal sacrifices in some of the African Latino religions. But then you pass into the age of theism, where people are not so doctrinaire about religion anymore, and they are vaguely spiritual, and they say, yes, there's one God, and we can go to church or temple or synagogue on the sacred day, but there's still sacrifice going on, and the sacrifice is of their joy, because they work so hard to make money, they work so hard to stay ahead of the game, that they sacrifice joy, they sacrifice happiness to get ahead. So that's a very sad type of sacrifice, and we see that all around us today. But then we move into the fourth stage, and I said this is exemplified by your Chapel of the Sacred Mirrors. This is the new polytheism. This is looking at the gods and goddesses as forces of nature. This is looking at the various Hindu and Buddhist and Christian and Muslim and Jewish saints and sages and deities as forces to be acknowledged as role models, but also as something that is no longer having power over us. We are learning from them, and we're giving power to them. And what are we sacrificing? We're sacrificing the ego. We're sacrificing our own self-centeredness. We're sacrificing this so that we can be at one with nature, so we can achieve Buddhahood, we can achieve enlightenment, we can achieve salvation, whatever you want to call it. And sacrificing the ego brings the joy and the happiness back into our life. So, those were the four stages, and that went over very well with the crowd. And I said, what you're doing here with the Chapel of the Sacred Mirrors is really now at the cutting edge of spirituality for the 21st century. Okay, so that sort of covers the bases, and it gives you some notion of how I have taken what started out to be scientific inquiry, and without sacrifice any scientific rigor, I have come up with both qualitative and quantitative research results, but then that has led me into my own spiritual path, and it's also led me into a very activist stance, because for some people, praying and meditating is enough, but for me, getting my hands dirty in the real world is the best way that I have of putting spirituality to work and finding spirituality in action. So, for what it's worth, that is my summary for you folks tonight. And namaste. Thank you for your rapt attention. Somebody will have to repeat the questions for me if I can't hear.
Dr. Krippner, I want to thank you very much for the work that you've done. I've never met you before, but I've seen a lot of the videos of your teachings, and I really appreciate the huge amount of work that you've done and illuminating.
Okay, now I'm not hearing you, so...
Oh, right here.
I need to translate. Even with the microphone, I can't hear you.
Dr. Krippner, what is your feeling about the interpenetration of our own personal psyches in dreams? Do you think when we dream that there is a sharing of one mind into another mind? There's a collective consciousness where there's actual communication going on?
Okay, fine, I heard that, yes. First of all, let me give you a little summary of my perspective on dreams. From the standpoint of human evolution, we wouldn't dream if dreaming was not adaptive in some way. And I think there's enough research right now indicating that dreaming, whether we remember the dreams or not, serves an adaptive purpose. Dreams allow memories to be stored. That's memories of what we've learned during the day. Dreams allow us to download emotions and work through emotions. That's why so many of our dreams are unpleasant. They serve a healthy purpose by being unpleasant. We're working through emotions so we don't wake up angry and jealous and irritated in the morning. At least it's not as much as you would if we didn't dream. Third, dreams prepare us for the future. We do some problem solving and we do some rehearsal for the future. And fourth, dreams complete gestalts. They tend to unfinished business, and they sort of knit together parts of our life that are unfinished. That's why we have so many dreams about strangers. Those strangers represent maybe a dozen different people, and that's why we dream so much about unknown places. Those unknown places are metaphors and symbols for parts of our life that need resolving. Now, in addition to those evolutionary purposes, dreams can be used for spiritual development because dreaming is one way for us to reach very, very deep centers of the psyche, and those deep centers of the psyche provide entanglement with other psyches. And this accounts for precognition in dreams, telepathy in dreams, clairvoyance in dreams, other types of parapsychological research like the research that I have done. And so, from time to time, we do have dreams in which we are actually sharing dreams with other people, and there is a literature on this of shared dreams. They're rare, but they do occur. However, shamans who specialize in this can do this at will. Shamans can dream lucidly at will. And there's a wonderful book called Communing with the Gods by Charles Laughlin, talking about many, many shamanic traditions in which lucid dreaming was practiced. Even before the Tibetans did it, the Tibetans are well known for their dreaming of the clear light. But they weren't the only ones. Native Americans specialized in native dreaming. Africans had lucid dreaming practices. Australian Aborigines had lucid dreaming practices. So there is this tradition in shamanism, and you will hear the shamans talk about how they visit other worlds in their dreams. And why not? These other worlds are, to my way of thinking, deeper levels or higher levels, whichever more metaphor you want to use, of the psyche that allow you to transcend ordinary time and space transcend your individuality, get more into a communal sharing, and also to become one with the forces of nature. I think that the examples you give are rare for most people, but they're very common in shamanism. And if a shaman wants to teach you how to do some of these things, and if you make a good case, yes, it's possible. One of my students at Saybrook wrote her entire dissertation on dream walking because she found a Native American shaman who's, she doesn't give the name for good reasons. As part of her work, she actually walks into people's dreams. Rolling Thunder did this. He was known to walk into people's dreams and heal them in their dreams. But this particular shaman has classes, and she is teaching her apprentices how to do dream walking. And they have started to walk into other people's dreams. So this is a skill that not everybody can do, but the people who do have that propensity and who do have a good reason for doing this that transcends egotistical reasons, but reasons out of compassion, love, and service, can apparently learn from a teacher how to do some of these incredible things that you mentioned. That's sort of a long exposition, but I wanted to cover all of the bases of your question.
Thank
you. Yes, you first, then you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to expand on that, but this time into psychedelics. I've noticed in my own tripping, like, for example, archetypal visions, LSD, mandalas, and even the paisley shape, magic mushrooms, body, and a loving feeling. Ayahuasca, snakes seem typical in everybody's trips. Everybody who takes acid sees a mandala. Everybody who takes ayahuasca sees snakes. I would like to know what your research has brought to this, to the archetypal.
Well, I think that the comment that you've made is certainly very profound. I think there are a number of ways to get into the so-called archetypal levels of the psyche, psychedelics being one, meditation being one, prayer being one. The list goes on and on and on. And people have to read Jung carefully to understand what he meant by archetypes, because the archetypes he felt were actually inherited. They actually were transmitted genetically. And archetypes like the trickster archetype, like the magical child archetype, express differently in different cultures. And when people aren't careful, they oversimplify archetypes. They start talking about the great Earth Mother. But there were sometimes Earth Fathers. In Central Europe, it was not the Earth Mother, it was the Earth Father who was venerated. In ancient Egypt, it was the Earth Father. It was the Sky Mother who arched above the Earth Father, but it was the Earth Father from whom the vegetables and the plants and the fruits grew. So that's why I say, yeah, there's an archetype, but it's the great Earth Parent. And you have to transcend gender because not all of the cultures of the world have the great Earth Mother. Now, the archetypes show up in dreams, they show up in psychedelics, they show up in visionary experiences. And I think that the archetypes are probably changing and are even being recreated as time goes on. We're now learning a lot about transgenerational transmission through the science of epigenetics, in other words, the way that genes express themselves. And we already have some evidence that people who are subjected to trauma will have their chromosomes changed so that the genes shift places on the chromosomes and then express themselves in different ways. And this can show up in their children. Now, this is not a mutation because there's no new gene here. It's just a rearrangement of genes. But for years, we've known that children of Holocaust survivors show some of the same symptoms as the Holocaust survivors themselves. And as well, this is because the Holocaust survivors talk about it, they behave differently. But what about the Holocaust survivors' children who never knew their parents who show this? Well, that's because of the epigenetic transmission. Now it's showing up with the grandchildren. Now, let's just take this to a broader level. Think of the cultural trauma of the slaves brought over from Africa, the cultural trauma of the Native Americans who had their lands taken from them by the European invaders. These groups are still suffering from the trauma, and I think it's all due to epigenetics. And this is passing on from generation to generation to generation. Yes, this can be reversed, but it's going to take a massive effort. It's going to mean empowerment, which is one reason that I do what work I can with oppressed minorities and certainly encourage people to do this type of work by empowering them and to have them reclaim their heritage. Eventually, this is going to produce a change at the chromosomal level as the genes rearrange themselves in, shall we say, a more healthy way. We already know that prayer, contemplation, and meditation can change the brain for the better, can make the brain more coherent. But one of the more recent findings is that a person who goes through psychotherapy can have better brain coherence. So, the brain is more plastic than we thought. The genes and their expression are more plastic than we thought. This is really something that can be empowering to people. Also, as some of you know, Terence McKenna, who left us far too early, thought that the use of psychedelics hastened human evolution. And his ideas were written off as ravings, as nonsense. Well, now that epigenetics has entered the picture, well, maybe he was onto something. Maybe the use of psychedelics by large groups of people in these native ceremonies did foster human evolution and did make the shift from Homo sapiens to Homo sapiens sapiens about, well, not that long ago, 50, 70,000 years ago, where people became aware that they were aware. And this happened pretty quickly. So maybe psychedelics played a role there, and this was a transmission that we now can explain in terms of what we know about epigenetics. So again, your question just opens up a whole number of responses from me, so I'm glad you asked the question. Gave me a chance to give some of my own highly opinionated notions on the topic. Yes, somebody over here has a question.
Thank you, Dr. Krippner. Am I coming through?
Can't hear you.
Thank you. You know, your comments about epigenetics partially answers my question, but I notice, it seems to me that in recent years, the research examinations of psychedelics has gone more and more in the direction of medical model research.
Into what research?
Medical model research.
Medical model research.
And less in the direction of qualitative examination through interviews and such. And what that leads me to wonder about is when you look at all the different conversations over the years about entheogens, it's a very mixed conversation as far as what's the source of the experience. Is it neuroscience? Is it spirits contained within the plant or the fungi? Is it the plant opens up something in our neuroscience that makes spirits out there available to us, which is different than thinking in terms of the plant spirits. So I just wonder at this stage of the conversation, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that this is a legitimate topic for research. There certainly are some initial studies being done that, using our sophisticated brain scanning equipment, we're zeroing in on what parts of the brain are active during out-of-body experiences, during lucid dreaming experiences, etc. And I think that eventually we'll get around to finding out what parts of the brain are active during an entheogenic experience. Now, I have a little problem in using the word entheogen instead of psychedelic, for it doesn't quite work for me, because psychedelics is simply mind manifesting. That covers a big territory. Entheogenics is finding the God within, but it doesn't work for everybody. You can have a psychedelic experience without having an entheogenic experience. So I prefer to use the term a potential entheogen when talking about LSD-type drugs. Potential. That doesn't mean it's ought to be automatic. Due to a person's setting, and substance, the 3 S's, a person might or might not get a entheogenic experience. Okay, good question, and I think that research is in the future, but in the meantime, we can still do a lot from interviews. We can still do a lot from phenomenological studies. We can still do a lot from behavioral research in terms of, and even questionnaires, pencil and paper tests. The famous Good Friday experiment that most of you folks know about. The results of that were basically personality tests and questionnaires, and the partial replication of that again used questionnaires and pencil and paper tests. No, that doesn't cover all of the territory, but it covers a great deal of it, and it shows that lasting shifts can be made by people who have the right preparation when they and the right setting when they take these potential entheogenics with the expectation that it's going to have a positive shift in their life. Okay, next one. Yes. Get the microphone and speak loudly. Yes.
Okay. So I was wondering.
No, can't hear a word.
Okay.
Sorry.
Here we go. Right. What do you think? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think is the impact of sleep aids on dream state and on the psychological state of the person?
The impact of
sleep aids, such as temazepam or Ambien. Yes.
Oh, sleep aids. AIDS. Okay.
Sleeping pills. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, well, there's considerable research on that. And first of all, there are some sleep aids that wipe out rapid eye movement sleep. Most people don't want to take those sleep aids because the dreams are very important for us. They do have limited applicability short-term for people who are very, very depressed. People who are very, very depressed have depressing dreams. This is a way that they're trying to work through the depression. And the depressing dreams never quite get their job done, and so the person is still depressed when they wake up. By eliminating rapid eye movement sleep, you eliminate most of the depressing dreams, and so this gives the psychotherapist a chance to get to work and bring the person up to a level where they can start having the dreams again. Very, very limited application of those types of sleep aids. Now, most of the sleep aids on the market do not interfere with REM sleep. And any of you that need sleep aids should find out from your doctor if the sleep aid that you're taking will eliminate REM sleep. If not, you just stay away from it, because there are plenty of sleep aids which will not eliminate REM sleep. Also, one should be aware of some of the herbal sleep aids, and these, of course, don't have some of the negative side effects that you run the risk for with pharmaceutical sleeping aids. And there's chamomile tea, there's valerian root tea, but also more and more in not only health food stores and supermarkets, you can find sleeping aids like Midnight, like Sleep MD, completely composed of herbal medicines. And I think it's more than the placebo, because I've taken some of them and I find them to be very effective. So, obviously it would be better if people were able to self-regulate their sleep cycles and their attention so they could drop into blissful sleep without sleep aids at all. But, you know, people are imperfect. Some of us do need sleep aids from time to time. But sleep hygiene is extremely important, and I recommend to people that they use their bed only for sex and for sleep. Don't use it to do homework. Don't take your computer to bed with you, because this interferes with sleep hygiene, or take it into a different bed. Sleep hygiene is very important, and Americans are chronically sleep deprived, especially undergraduate college students, and this eventually catches up with them. Getting enough sleep varies from person to person. Some people do very well with 6 hours sleep a night. Some people need 7. Some people need 8. You have to figure out your own amount of sleep and then make sure you have your full sleep dream cycle, so you get the deep wave sleep and you get the rapid eye movement sleep. I do a lot of work with post-traumatic stress disorder, and here's where sleep hygiene is very important. This is where nightmares come into the picture, and sometimes I give a whole seminar on the topic of PTSD nightmares, because I maintain that therapists who work with trauma assume too much. They assume the nightmares will clear up when the trauma is resolved. No, not necessarily so. The nightmares take on a life of their own, and the nightmares have to be approached directly. There are some very good nightmare therapies out there that are evidence-based, like image rehearsal therapy. And those of you who are members of the International Association of the Study of Dreams, I hope a few of you are, know that we'll have our international conference in Berkeley in June of this year. And one of our keynote speakers will be Barry Krakow, who has developed excellent therapies for PTSD nightmares. And he allows people to change the images in some way or another so that the nightmare can start processing the trauma. The problem with PTSD nightmares is people have the same nightmare over and over again. It's a replay of the trauma with a little variation here and there. The dream is trying to process that emotion and get it through the system, but the trauma was just so severe, it was so stubborn, it won't work its way through the system. And so people have these nightmares. They wake up at night. They're afraid to go to sleep at night. Yes, sometimes they can take medication, but the medication is short-term. It doesn't get to the root of the trauma. A direct approach to a traumatic nightmare can really start a cascade effect that can affect the resolution of the whole PTSD syndrome for women and men who are raped, for veterans, women and men who come back from the horrible wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, people who have been in accidents, motorcycle accidents, car crashes, people who've been bullied and abused emotionally and physically. All of these traumas that people are subjected to, and for some of them, they waltz right through it. It doesn't affect them. Some of them who aren't very resilient, yes, it affects them very severely, and they have these nightmares, and sometimes these people suffer nightmares for the rest of their life because they don't know how to cope with them. But like I say, we do now have some good therapies and some ways that are helpful. This takes us a little bit away from the topic of sleep aids, but I think I've already answered that for you. Okay, we had another question from that part of the room.
Hi, thank you, Stanley. I'm back here. Hi. I'm just curious if you've found in your research, or if others have found...
Sorry, can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Nope.
Hello?
You can try.
Okay, maybe I'll move up a little bit. Okay. So I'm curious if you found in your research, or if others have found in their research, that encounters with potential entheogens can open up the dream realm to initiatic experience, visionary states, ceremonies, ancestral work, divine encounters, and such.
Okay, now stay right there, because you're asking about my research with potential entheogens, and did you ask if that it influences or triggers something? But I didn't quite get what.
Yes, if it can trigger or open up the dream realm to experiences that are entheogen-like.
Oh, the dream realm. Yes, okay, that I can answer. All right. There's been research on this, and what has been found is that LSD does extend rapid eye movement sleep, especially the first period of rapid eye movement sleep. Now, it's not long-term, but it's short-term. So people do tend to dream more shortly after taking a psychedelic. But that's not as important as what I think your question was getting at, and that's the content of the dream. This really has not been exhaustively studied, but it certainly does change the content of dreams for some people, not all the time, but many people will re-experience the psychedelic content in their dreams, especially if the psychedelic experience opened up something which, remember the functions of dreams, something that needs to be remembered, that needs to be downloaded, that needs to be resolved, that needs to help plan for the future. Psychedelics can do all of those things, and it's no wonder that some of that resolution takes place in dreams. I'm saying this more on an anecdotal basis from people I've talked to. The type of study that you're asking about has not been done. I just wish somebody would do it. But, you know, who's going to give money to study psychedelics and their effect on dreams? You can get money to study nightmares and PTSD. You can get money to study sleep disturbances. You cannot get money, well, you can barely get money to study psychedelics in any form, which allows me to do the little detour. MDMA or ecstasy, with privately funded money, is now being used for PTSD veterans in some clinics in the southwest part of the United States. And to get permission, it took years to get permission for only a few dozen veterans. Well, the results have been so positive, we should be using ecstasy for hundreds, if not thousands of veterans. You realize that of all the veterans who come back with PTSD, 1/2 never see a therapist at all, never even see a doctor to get drugs at all. 1/2 of them just suffer. Of the half who do go to a therapist, half drop out after the first session, probably because the therapist doesn't know how to treat PTSD. So this is where a well-trained therapist using MDMA could really do a lot of good. But it's hard. It's hard to persuade the powers that be in the Veterans Administration, in the National Institutes of Health, and other governmental agencies to make this aid available. And it's a shame, because the little bit of data we have is highly positive, and it doesn't take more than a couple of MDMA sessions really to turn the tide on PTSD. I have 2 books out on this topic. One is called PTSD Biography of a Disease. The other is called Haunted by Combat. And these are the only 2 books about PTSD that give a few paragraphs to the use of MDMA. And so it's very hard to get this into the mainstream literature. Well, I've done it, but other authors should be doing the same thing. They should be aware of the research, and they should really be encouraging more of this research to be done. It could save a lot of lives. I mean, the suicide rate for PTSD veterans is just gets worse by the year, and this is one thing that could save a lot of lives.
One last question over here.
Next question.
Hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Stanley, I liked how you spoke about using your hands and getting your hands dirty.
No, I'm not hearing you.
I like how you spoke about using your hands and getting yourself, in the work physically. Can you hear me?
Somebody will have to translate. I'm not hearing you. Or else you're going to have to come up like those young women did and stand right in front of me.
How about this? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I like what you said about using your hands, bringing the work to physical.
Yes.
I'm a student at CIS right now, and before coming here, I was an ecologist.
You were
an ecologist,
really?
working with earth restoration.
Yes.
So I'm looking at this situation right now planetarily,
Yes.
and I'm very concerned about it.
Yes. Good.
Not only are we committing suicide within ourselves, we are committing ecological suicide.
Yes.
I'm really here to develop some psycho-spiritual tools to come at the environmental problem using mental constructs and solutions. And I'm wondering a couple of things. My grandmother, who's, closer to your age, admitted to me last summer that she regularly speaks with spirits.
She what?
She regularly speaks with spirits in her dreams. I'm looking at my generation and the one before mine and wondering what happened to the spiritual discourse in this country such that we don't have that conversation regularly anymore. In fact, it's taboo.
That's right.
So I would wonder if you could comment as an elder what conversations or what might actually inspire mental healing with the use of dreams and or psychedelics such that our behaviors could become life-affirming for Gaia right now.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what's needed for us to make that shift, to begin to speak openly about spirituality as a healing thing, as a love and peace thing, and actually begin to practice behaviors that are life-affirming?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm doing it, but I'm looking out there at the cohort and saying, well, hey, what's it going to take to get us on board here?
In some ways, this is the most important question that's come up this evening. And as you probably know, the United Nations' most recent report is very pessimistic. They really think that that it's virtually too late to save the ecology of the planet. And as years and years go by, things will only get worse. Many of the bizarre shifts in the weather you can pin down to global warming and ecological destruction. And people are not taking it seriously. They've had a rough winter on the East Coast. I was just on the East Coast, and many people are saying, you're talking about global warming? We're having global cooling. And they are not taking global warming seriously, but they don't know enough about climate. They don't realize the cold weather on the East Coast is a result of the ecological problems that we face. So massive education has to be done. Where is this education coming from? Unfortunately, you're not getting much of it in the media. How many stories do you have in the media connecting some of these bizarre weather changes with the underlying ecological problems? Now, the polls that are done over the years by Gallup, by Pew, by the other agencies are not very encouraging. Concern for the ecology now is number 6 in terms of U.S. national concerns. A few years ago, it was number 3, but it's gone down. Well, there are obviously the state of the economy is higher, and I can understand that, but the steady decline indicates that people are less and less interested. And how are we going to awaken them? Yeah, many people are awakened to the plight of Gaia through psychedelics, that's true. Many of them are awakened through the celebration of Earth Day, through Al Gore's writings and other ecologists' writings, but not enough. I just wish that I had a simple answer for you. I should say that people often ask me who have been the most spiritually evolved people that I've met during my lifetime. And I say I don't really like to rank and rate people because you're looking for famous names, and some of the people who I think are very spiritual souls are unknown to you but are doing their excellent work privately. But if I were to name people who are well known, I would say Albert Hoffman, a good friend of mine, and he was well aware of the plight of the earth, and he was always making a big thing about how people should be spending more time with nature and pay more attention to the plight of nature. And Albert Hoffman was quite a remarkable person. I could talk for half an hour about some of our times together and all that I learned from him and his writings, and also some of the funny things. We had some very enjoyable times together. No, I never tripped with him, but I didn't have to. He was a trip on his own. Now, I had the great fortune of growing up on a farm, and my father was about the first person who used what was called organic agriculture with his fruit trees. And then when I met Alan Watts, I came face to face with a full-fledged ecologist, because one of Alan Watts's great interests was in ecology, and he spent a lot of time with ecologists. He wrote about it, he spoke about it. That came from his background in Taoism, actually, because Taoism, of all of the world philosophies, is probably the one that is closest to nature. And I'm talking about major world philosophies. The Native American philosophies, yes, they were always very close to nature. And it was Alan Watts who actually gave a lot of substance and form to my interest in the plight of the earth, the cry of Gaia. And so there are materials out there, there is information out there, but the media don't make enough of this, and you've got to look into the reasons why. Taking care of the environment is a threat to a lot of commercial interests, and to a lot of commercial interests that sponsor television, radio, film, what have you. And to confront these very, very powerful groups, individuals, and agencies and corporations is not an easy task. I suppose that what it will take will be a full-fledged disaster, and even then, the people who are opposing action are going to blame the disasters on something else. I mean, we've had tsunamis, we've had earthquakes, and earthquakes, of course, can be connected with the fracking that's going on. We've had all of the confirmation in terms of the symptoms of the earth crisis, but we don't have masses of people connecting the dots. Well, this is of great concern to me, and I do what I can, and I try to spread the word about what Native people have done and the Native American prophecies. Rolling Thunder, this was an interesting coincidence that I talk about in our book, The Voice of Rolling Thunder. One of my friends arranged for Rolling Thunder and Alan Watts and I to do a whole weekend of seminars at the University of New Mexico in Las Cruces. And this was an incredible event. The one thing that all three of us had in common was our concern for ecology, for the fate of the earth. And we gave a symposium. Actually, Alan Watts and Rolling Thunder were much more eloquent than I was, so I just reinforced what they said. We gave a whole symposium on that topic. It really raised the consciousness of the students who hadn't given it much thought. Well, we need more events like that, and we need more activism on this topic. I think that there are certainly enough environmental groups plugging away on this. I give money to about half a dozen of them myself, doing good work, and trying to get to the tipping point where there will be massive awareness. And this doesn't have to be in terms of sheer numbers. You have to reach the right people. Remember what Margaret Mead said. She said, it only takes a few people to change the world. And it's always been this way. Targeting people who can make a difference, I think, is the way to do this. And this can come from the bottom up, it can come from the top down. This is the one question tonight. I don't have a good, solid answer to it. I'm sorry. All I can say is that I really share your concern. Now, you're also mentioning about talking to spirits, and I have a case study I write about in some of my books. A woman of your grandmother's age and my age, Native American woman, who went to a clinic in the southwest United States because she had the common cold, and the doctor on duty asked her some questions, and he asked her if she talked with spirits. Oh, yes, I talk with spirits all the time. You realize that that was the wrong response. It got her locked up, and they started to give her medication. They decided she was schizophrenic, and she eventually got out. How did she get out? The spirits told her, don't take the medication, pretend you're taking it, and then just throw it away, flush it down the toilet, and then tell the doctors that medication works so well I don't hear the spirits anymore, and then they'll let you out. That's exactly what happened. Well, the net result of some of my work with anomalous phenomena has been to get people in power in psychiatry and psychology not to pathologize some of these unusual experiences. Probably the most important of my books is a book called The Varieties of Anomalous Experience, which I edited with two friends of mine in the year 2000, and now this year a new edition of it is out. And what we have done is to point out how psychic experiences, past life experiences, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, etc., 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 are not in and of themselves pathological. They're part of the human spectrum of experience. Now, we also separate experience from event. The fact that you're having a past life experience doesn't mean there was an event in which you had that past life. That might or might not have happened, but that experience needs to be examined. It might be a metaphor for something that's happening in this life, who knows. But the experience itself is not necessarily a sign of pathology. Well, I wish that I could do a book that would do as much good for the ecological movement. And I try to do this in my writings about indigenous people, so I do my bit, and I know a lot of you folks do your bit too, and talking with spirits certainly gives the inspiration. Talking with the earth gives the inspiration, and listening to Gaia gives the inspiration, so the more that is done, the better, and maybe more people will hear about that. Okay, good question.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, this is, we're going to have to close it up.
Our time is just about up.
Yes, we're going to have to close it up. So let's give a big round of applause for Stanley. Thank you very much.